The gavel slammed like a gunshot in the tense, silent air of the courtroom. Every eye was fixed on Judge Beryl Howell, a figure of imposing severity draped in black robes that seemed to swallow the light. Her voice, cold and sharp as polished steel, cut through the stillness, attempting to sanction Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett for what she called a blatant disregard for judicial decorum. The words hung in the air, heavy with accusation. But it was the silence that followed that spoke volumes, a breathless, electric pause where the very idea of justice felt suspended in the balance. And then, Congresswoman Crockett rose. Not with anger, not with fear, but with a stillness that radiated power. Her eyes never left the judges, and when she finally spoke, her voice was calm, clear, and carried the weight of unshakable truth. What she said in that moment didn't just challenge the sanction, it challenged the very foundation of power in that room, leaving everyone stunned and setting the stage for a confrontation that would echo far beyond those walls. The old rules were about to be rewritten, and it would start with her next move. But to understand the earthquake, you first had to feel the tectonic plates shifting. This wasn't some obscure procedural debate over legal minutiae. The case itself was a lightning rod, a challenge to a new state law that sought to silence dissent and criminalize protest, a law disproportionately targeting communities of color and their allies. Congresswoman Crockett wasn't just there as an observer. She was there as a witness for the people, giving voice to those the system hoped to ignore. And Judge Beryl Howell? She wasn't just any judge. She was a gatekeeper of the status quo, a jurist with a long, polished record of siding with power, of dismissing claims of bias, of upholding systems that looked exactly like the one she presided over. This was a collision that had been building for years, a showdown between the desperate cry for justice and the cold, marble silence of entrenched authority. For Howell, this was about order. For Crockett, it was about survival. The sanction wasn't just a rebuke, it was a message, a warning from the powerful to anyone who dared to speak truth in their halls. But in trying to silence Jasmine Crockett, Judge Howell made a fatal miscalculation. She thought she was dealing with a politician. She was dealing with a prodigy of the people, a woman who had fought her way from the margins to the center of power without ever losing the fire that brought her there. This wasn't just a legal skirmish, it was a clash of ideologies. And what happened next would send shockwaves from the courtroom to the corridors of Congress, proving that some voices, once unleashed, cannot be contained. To understand the woman behind the robe, you have to go back. Beryl Howell's career is a masterclass in climbing the ladder of power within a system that rewards conformity and punishes dissent. A former federal prosecutor, she built her reputation on being tough, uncompromising, and fiercely protective of institutional authority. Her ascent to Chief Judge of the U.S. District Court in Washington, D.C. wasn't an accident. It was a calculated conquest. But somewhere along the way, the pursuit of order curdled into something darker, an unshakable arrogance, a belief that the system she served was not just functionally correct, but morally infallible. Her courtroom became her kingdom, and her gavel, a scepter. She presided over cases with a chilling efficiency, often cutting off defendants from marginalized backgrounds, dismissing their experiences with a wave of her hand and a citing of procedure. There was the time she handed down a shockingly harsh sentence to a young, non-violent offender from a poor neighborhood, calling it a necessary example, while later that same week, she showed notable leniency to a white-collar executive from an influential family, citing his potential for rehabilitation. The pattern was there, woven through her rulings, a consistent skepticism toward claims of racial bias, a roll of the eyes at the mention of systemic injustice, a deep-seated conviction that those who challenged the system were simply disorderly, not dispossessed. She saw herself as a bulwark against chaos, a guardian of the law. But to those on the receiving end of her judgments, she was the human embodiment of a machine that grinds people down. Her power had gone unchecked for so long that she had forgotten what it looked like to be challenged, truly challenged. Not by a legal argument, but by a force of moral conviction that matched her own authority. She had built a career on being the smartest, most formidable person in the room, but every villain meets their match. And for Howell, that match was a woman who'd been preparing for this moment her entire life. If Beryl Howell's story is one of climbing a ladder built by others, then Jasmine Crockett's is one of building her own ladder, from the ground up, with her own two hands. Her journey didn't begin in the hallowed halls of an Ivy League law school. It began in the streets of Dallas, Texas, watching her community grapple with a system that seemed designed to keep them down. The daughter of a nurse and a postal worker, she learned early on that dignity wasn't given. It was taken through relentless effort and unyielding principle. She wasn't to the manor born, she was to the struggle born, and it forged in her a resilience that no courtroom could ever shatter. She put herself through law school, not as a stepping stone to wealth, but as a weapon, a tool to dismantle the very injustices she had witnessed growing up. As a civil rights attorney, she didn't defend corporate interests. She defended people. She stood between families and foreclosure, between young men and excessive sentences, between communities and predatory laws. Every case was a battle, and every victory, however small, was a testament to her core belief that the law in the right hands could be a shield for the powerless, not just a sword for the powerful. Her move into politics wasn't a quest for title. It was an expansion of that same battlefield. As a state representative and now a congresswoman, she carried the voices of her community into rooms that had never wanted to hear them, facing down lobbyists, old guard politicians, and outright bigotry with the same calm, forensic precision she honed in the courtroom. She knew the law, yes, but more importantly, she knew its weight. She knew how it felt when it was used against you, and that knowledge made her fearless. Little did Howell know, Crockett wasn't just a politician. She was a force of nature, a storm of principle and preparation, and she was about to make landfall. The air in the courtroom grew thick, charged with the unsaid. Judge Howell leaned forward, her voice dripping with a condescension she didn't bother to veil. "The court is well aware of the representative's penchant for theatricality," she began, each word a carefully placed dagger. "But this is a court of law, not a political stage. Your continued interruptions are a disrespect to this institution itself." She spoke as if explaining basic arithmetic to a child, her gaze cold and dismissive. But Congresswoman Crockett didn't flinch. She stood with a posture that was neither aggressive nor submissive, but rooted. "With all due respect, Your Honor," Crockett replied, her voice even and clear, cutting through Howell's disdain like a laser. "The right to dissent is not theatricality. It is the bedrock of the very democracy this institution is sworn to protect." Howell's eyes narrowed. A faint flush crept up her neck. She was not used to being corrected, especially not so publicly and so poignantly. "Do not confuse your podium with my bench, Congresswoman," Howell snapped, her composure beginning to crack at the edges. "Another outburst and I will not hesitate to hold you in contempt." The threat hung in the air, a grenade with the pin pulled. Yet Crockett's expression remained one of calm defiance. "I am not here to make outbursts, Your Honor. I am here to bear witness, and the people I represent deserve to be heard, not gavelled into silence." The exchange was a masterclass in contrast. Howell's escalating frustration, a storm of perceived disrespect, crashing against the unassailable shore of Crockett's principled resolve. You could see the confusion on the judge's face, the dawning realization that her usual tactics of intimidation were failing spectacularly. She had expected submission, and instead found a mirror held up to her own abuse of authority. With a final, flustered wave of her hand, Howell believed she had reasserted control, that the threat of sanction had cowed her opponent. She thought she'd won, but Crockett was just getting started. A profound silence fell, the kind that exists only in the vacuum before a revolution. Congresswoman Crockett did not raise her voice. She did not need to. She let the silence speak, first allowing the weight of the judge's empty threat to hang in the air, fully felt by everyone present. Then she began, her tone not of anger but of devastating clarity. "Your Honor, if we are to speak of disrespect, let us speak of it fully. Let us speak of the disrespect shown to the citizens of this district when their elected representative is threatened with contempt for fulfilling her duty. But since you have invoked the law, let us examine it together. What followed was not a defense. It was a masterful, surgical dismantling. Crockett began by citing Bridges versus California, her words measured and precise. The Supreme Court has long held that robust political speech, even that which criticizes the judiciary, is protected by the First Amendment. My comments fall squarely within that protection. She then wove in historical context, speaking of the Sedition Act of 1798 and the lessons learned from attempts to criminalize dissent. This nation was founded by those who refused to be silenced by the Crown's version of decorum. To sanction me today is to side with a history of oppression we claim to have overcome. But the true blow came when she turned the mirror on Howell herself. And let's be clear about the disrespect you cite. Is it truly disrespect for me to speak, or is it disrespectful to the power structure you represent that I refuse to be silent? She paused, letting the question resonate in the stunned courtroom. Your record, Your Honor, is a matter of public record. In State v. Jenkins, you dismissed claims of racial profiling in a police stop, calling the data anecdotal. In Department of Education v. Myers, you ruled against loan forgiveness for defrauded students from a minority-serving institution, citing a technicality while ignoring the profound injustice. This is not a pattern of impartial judgment. It is a pattern of protecting a system that benefits from inequality. With each cited case, with each cold, hard fact, the atmosphere shifted. The initial gasps from the gallery softened into a rapt, breathless attention. Howell's stern mask began to fracture. A slight tremble in her hand as she reached for her water glass. A tightening around her eyes that betrayed not anger, but a dawning, horrifying realization that her authority, her entire persona of unimpeachable control, was evaporating under the heat of incontrovertible truth. Crockett wasn't finished. You speak of this institution's dignity, Judge Howell, but true dignity is not found in the silence of the oppressed. It is found in the unwavering application of justice equally for everyone. You seek to sanction me for challenging you. I would suggest that the real sanction should fall on a judiciary that too often confuses its own power for justice itself. She concluded not with a fiery crescendo, but with a devastating calm that was more powerful than any shout. So sanction me if you feel you must. Make your statement, but know that it will not be a statement about my conduct. It will be a statement for the history books, documenting yet another attempt to use the law as a weapon against those who dare to demand that it be a shield. The final word seemed to hang in the air, vibrating. Howell's face was ashen. Her composure shattered. She could not refute the precedents. She could not erase her own record. The gavel in her hand was no longer a symbol of authority, but a useless weight. The courtroom didn't erupt in cheers. It was too stunned for that. The victory was too complete, too profound for mere noise. With one speech, Crockett didn't just defend herself. She exposed a system rotten to its core, leaving its chief guardian publicly and utterly defeated in the one arena she believed she controlled completely. It took less than a minute. In the dead air of the stunned courtroom, a single phone screen lit up, then another. A quiet click of a recording being stopped, a thumb hovering over a post button. Then, the digital dam broke. The first clip was a raw 23-second video, shaky but clear, capturing the exact moment Congresswoman Crockett cited Judge Howell's own record. It hit Twitter, and for a heartbeat there was silence. Then the internet exploded. The hashtag #Crockett counterattack didn't just trend, it went supernova, fueled by a collective pent-up fury at systems of unaccountable power. The clip was everywhere, stitched into reaction videos from law students, played on loop on cable news, blaring from phones in coffee shops and on college campuses. Memes erupted instantly. A picture of Judge Howell's stunned face photoshopped next to a crumbling statue, the caption, "When the foundation of bias cracks." Another showed Crockett as a superhero, her suit adorned with the scales of justice, calmly deflecting gavels with a legal brief. News desks scrambled. Pundits who minutes before had been discussing other topics were now frantically getting briefed, their producers shouting in their earpieces. Headlines shifted in real time. "Not a snub, a reckoning," one read. "Crockett doesn't just win debate, she redefines it," blared another. Allies and celebrities, those with platforms of millions, didn't just share the video. They amplified it into a cultural rallying cry. "This is what holding power accountable looks like," and wrote a famous actor. A legendary musician simply posted the clip with a crown emoji. A prominent pastor tweeted, "She didn't raise her voice, she raised the standard." It was more than a viral moment. It was a validation. For millions watching, it was a shot of adrenaline. A clear, undeniable example of dignity, not just overcoming arrogance, but systematically dismantling it on its own turf. The ripple effect was immediate. Commentators began dissecting Howell's entire judicial history with a new critical lens. Political opponents of the judge found new courage, issuing statements of support for Crockett and calling for judicial review. The story was no longer about a sanction, it was about a symbol of what happens when preparation meets principle, when truth is spoken to power without apology. The entire episode became a case study in real time, a masterclass in resistance that would be taught, discussed, and referenced for years to come. But the real victory wasn't trending. It was the lesson America was about to learn. In the end, this was never about a legal technicality or a moment of political theater. It was a collision of two worlds, two philosophies, two versions of America vying for its soul. On one side stood the old guard, the Howells of the world, cloaked in the illusion of impartiality, wielding procedure as a weapon to maintain a corrosive status quo. Their power relies on silence, on the unspoken agreement that the rules are theirs to interpret and theirs alone. They believe dignity is a title bestowed by institutions. But on the other side stood a new vision. The Crocketts, who understand that true dignity isn't given, it's claimed. It's the unwavering courage to stand in the belly of the beast and speak truth with such clarity that the beast has no choice but to recognize itself. This was a triumph, yes, but not just for one woman in one courtroom. It was a triumph for every person who has ever been told to sit down, be quiet, and know their place. It was a declaration that representation isn't just about a seat at the table. It's about having the voice to rearrange the entire room. Jasmine Crockett's victory proved that moral clarity is the most powerful force in any room, more powerful than a gavel, a title, or a lifetime of entrenched authority. It reminded us that justice is not a passive outcome delivered by institutions. It is an active demand made by the courageous. This moment calls on all of us to look at the Howells in our own lives, the systems, the biases, the silent agreements that uphold injustice, and challenge them not with rage, but with relentless, undeniable truth. It asks us to arm ourselves with knowledge, to root ourselves in principle, and to remember that the most profound changes often begin with a single, calm voice refusing to be silenced. Let this be our lesson. Let this be our standard. In a world of Howells, be a Crockett. What you just witnessed was more than a political moment, it was a blueprint. A reminder that when we arm ourselves with truth and stand with unshakable courage, no courtroom, no system, no symbol of outdated power can hold us down. This is why we tell these stories, to remind you that your voice matters, that your resistance is necessary, that history isn't just written by the powerful, it's rewritten by the brave. If this moment moved you, if it ignited something in you, then don't let that feeling end here. Share this video with someone who needs to see it. Let them know that dignity always wins. Subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications, because we are just getting started. This isn't just politics. It's about who we are. Subscribe and join the movement. And in the comments, tell us this. When have you had to be a Crockett in your own world? Your story is the next chapter. Now go write it.